Build Your Business listeners. This is Matt Reynolds, your host for the podcast, and you are listening to what we are calling the legacy episodes. And really, these are the pre-episodes that really led to this podcast, the Build Your Business podcast. This is really my life's work and my brother's life's work in building your business. And so they were originally published in the Barbell Logic podcast as part of the Principles or Coaching Success series, but really touch on similar topics to the Build Your Business podcast: how to improve your productivity, how to set and accomplish your goals, deprioritize urgent tasks, to focus on what is most important to you, and most importantly, to become a better person and leader and business owner overall. I'm proud to bring you these podcasts. Again, many years of life's work, several years of podcasts, and several decades of business ownership. Hope you enjoy them and learn from them. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. It is a Sunday Principles edition. I am Matt Reynolds. I'm usually here. My brother Chris is with me. I'm actually really excited for this show, and let me tell you why I think I'm excited, although I may be wrong. In the past, we have done shows, Scott and I have done shows way back, I think in like the 40s episode, in the 40 episode, we're like at 320 or something now, where we talked about things that bring us value and things that rob us of value. And I want to be clear, when we say value, we don't literally mean monetary value, although certainly some things might in fact bring you monetary value. We're really talking about joy. And I've said this, I don't want to play semantics too much, but I have, this is not mine, I'm stealing it from a guy I really like, but I don't think of joy and happiness as the same thing. I think of happiness as fleeting, as something that doesn't last. Our Grandma Peggy, is sick and dying right now. As a matter of fact, by the time this comes out, you and I will have lost our last grandma. It's kind of sad to think about. And so our mom got called down to, she flew down to Houston yesterday to go be with her mom on her last days. It appears she's had a stroke and whatnot. And so our mom is not happy today. But our mom can still have joy at what the things are that bring her value. And so to me, these things that bring us joy or bring us value regardless of our situation in life. And happiness is often more fleeting, right? If I stub my toe real hard, or like the day that Kinsley broke her arm when we were all down at Big Cedar Lodge, like I'm not happy at all. But like I can still be joyful in a lot of those things. Like it's not about like this fleeting thing that happens this afternoon. Right? These are things that kind of work whether I'm super happy or not. And so one of the things that I'm excited about in this episode is I'm assuming, #not a fan, that Chris Reynolds has not listened to that episode in the 40s to hear my specific things that I listed that were things that brought me value or robbed me of value. Is that true?
That is true.
Now, you're going to know a lot of the things because you and I are really, really close. But I'm interested to see the direction you take this, having not heard mine or Scott's, to talk through some of those things. So take it away. You want to talk about the stuff that brings you value first? You want to go back and forth? What is the format you'd like to take?
That's a good question. I was thinking about that. Let's hit a few things that are almost old and expired at this point that I don't even consider them anymore, that rob me of value.
Okay.
But they were, look, I'm not even going to pretend that I have a very close understanding of the common working professional at this point. That type of life has been gone from me for quite some time. And so there are some complexities to that as things go along. But when Matt and I started, I mean, like in life, we were quite literally in total poverty. We grew up in literally below the poverty line. And so, you know, it's a big move to go from there to the point of being retired at the age of 37. And and I've learned a lot along the way. One of the very first things that happened that I would consider sort of a luxury to remove something that robbed me of joy was I stopped mowing my lawn. So it's like so simple, but like, God damn it, if every Saturday when you finally had a little bit of time to just sort of maybe chill out and relax, you weren't out working on your lawn. And some people love doing this. It actually brings them joy. And that's okay. But I was never working on my lawn. I was always trying to fix a broken lawnmower.
Right.
For some period of time.
Because we were broke. We didn't have nice stuff.
Because we were broke.
Yeah.
So I was crappy lawnmowers. I'm trying to figure out how to, and figuring out how things work is fun. Once I know how they work, and what I'm really doing is slicing my fingers open, trying to work on the motor of a push mower is not fun. And so I got to the point where I realized that while it took me maybe a couple hours to knock out mowing my lawn, paying somebody else to mow my lawn took them like 15, 20 minutes and didn't cost me very much. And I got rid of that many years ago. And I have not picked it
how
back
long
up
ago do you think?
since
You
then.
think when was the last time you mowed your lawn? It's been 10 years.
Oh, it's been longer than that.
You hired people to
it's
mow your lawn in your early 20s, I guess. Then
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, as soon as the company took off enough that
you could afford the $22 to pay somebody to mow your lawn.
Right,
Like,
that's right. I mean, we sacrificed, going out to Taco Bell.
That's right.
A time or two,
Right.
in order to cover that one.
have you noticed that there are people in your neighborhood? We both live in nice neighborhoods. You live in a little more of a spread out. Like you've got kind of you got a great big lot where your house is.
Right.
My house are nice custom homes. They're not all, they're all different and stuff. And we have tons of retired people. Matter of fact, most of my neighborhood is sort of upper class retired people. They all mow their lawns. And I'm like, guys,
A lot of people around here mow their lawns too.
72 years old. You're out there mowing your lawn. It's 104 outside.
Thing is, I talked to Grandpa about it once, and he was like, I like mowing my lawn. And I was like, great. If you like mowing your lawn, you should mow your lawn.
Yeah, agreed.
I don't, and I'm glad I didn't do it. And so as soon as I got my Saturdays back, the net value increase to me was absolutely
More
enormous.
than the $22 of paying.
By far more than the $22. The second biggest thing was my wife and I have really we don't fight much. I mean, like, we have disagreements here and there on a few topics, but you never find we don't escalate in arguments or anything like that. But if there were arguments in our early marriage, it was about the house. It was about cleaning the house, because her threshold for things needing to be clean is very, very low, meaning that if there are a few things out, it's time to pick up.
Right.
Whereas I can let things accumulate for a while until they really start irritating me. And then so unfortunately for her, that would mean that she spent a lot of time picking things up, especially once we had kids. So the next big thing for us was we had to get somebody to clean the house, like a once a week, in the evening, somebody's doing the floors, somebody's doing the windows, somebody's cleaning the glass, like that kind of thing. That's a night of my life once a week. You could tally that up and realize how much life you've wasted doing that. For me, no joy in it whatsoever. Also, we have slightly different standards about how to do things, and so that would always be sort of an issue. And it disappeared the day after so it was only a few years after hiring somebody to mow the lawn that we had advanced in the world enough to be able to pay to have somebody come out and clean the house like once every other week, I think is about what we typically do, something like that. And so those are two things that obviously completely robbed me of joy and value, and the opportunity costs were massively, it was far better for me to spend my time doing anything else than that.
Very quickly, I think what's interesting to note here is that in both of your first two examples, you talked about the thing that you were having to do that robbed you of joy. And my guess then is that then hiring those things out, you actually needed to have your lawn mowed, and you needed to have a clean house, and probably having a mowed lawn and having a clean house brings you joy, and it now brings you joy to let someone else do that. And so it's actually, you took a thing that robbed you of joy and you replaced it with a thing that brought you joy.
That's right. And freed up time for the things that bring me the absolute most joy, which we can get into here in a minute. I think the more that I look at my list here, I think I'm just going to go through the robs first. We're just going to have to all deal with all the things that rob me of joy, and then we can talk about the things that add joy. So we'll do that. This has been a long-standing thing for me, and I think I think it's very worthwhile to evaluate this. I remember eating breakfast with you, Matt, and you bringing me your list of things that robbed you of joy and things that added joy. Maybe it was an early list, but I think it's worth evaluating maybe semi-frequently, because those things change as you change over time. And so this is one that you'll find interesting. I'm robbed of joy by reading the news.
Yep.
I hate the news.
Yep.
I've come to decide that reading the news, it may have been Nassim Taleb or something that said, if you want to cure yourself forever of feeling like you need to read the news, just read last week's news for a year, and then you'll never do it again.
Right.
Because what you realize is how many things are completely inconsequential and matter zero from that seemed
a big deal,
critical,
the first 24
and
hours.
Enormous, in the day, like, the headlines. And you realize, like, everything about the news is meant to get your eyeballs and is meant to drive up your energy and create a rage machine. Of course, and when I say the news, I'm not just talking about newspapers. I'm talking about and newspaper sites. I'm even talking about things like Twitter and other places, Facebook, where people get news. Now, that's not to say those tools aren't valuable. I still use Twitter from time to time. I kind of like it to do investment research sometimes. There's a few little things like that. But as far as reading that stuff, just to get the news on a daily basis, because it's like it's kind of like FOMO, right? It's a little bit of fear of missing out on knowing what's going on. Like, bullshit. I'm sorry. You don't need to know most of that stuff.
Sure.
So reading the news robs me of joy.
Well, especially not a guy who at this point is holed up in his house and retired. Like,
true.
Who do you need to know? Who do you need to impress with your knowledge of the news at this point?
Well, and the interesting thing is, I mean, a lot of I was trying to mimic some of what I had heard about the way that Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger do their investment work. And they all, always talked about reading newspapers. Well, it turns out, I guess Munger doesn't really read many newspapers. He immediately moves into the book he's going to read. Right. And that brings me a ton of joy. We'll talk about that later. But news articles, anymore, especially, the world has changed dramatically. A lot of the news being written that we read was written by somebody who puts out 20 articles a week. Now, you tell me how high quality it could possibly be for someone who doesn't know what they're talking about to write 20 articles a week. They're just looking for eyeballs, and they're looking for
the
headlines.
Inability to be objective as well, right? That's the problem.
And inability to be objective. You can read. It's so, it jumps off the page just how slanted everything is that you
on every end of the spectrum.
On every end, absolutely. The other thing is, I would say that I am generally robbed of value by most home improvement projects. That wasn't the case in my early life. I wanted to understand how everything worked in my house, so I remodeled a 1911 bungalow when I was in my 20s. And I learned how to do...
Also remodeled that 1911 bungalow.
You helped me finish that one up.
Because you had already you were doing well, and I was still broke. I was still a teacher, a shop teacher, and I would come during the summers and help renovate that house.
Yeah, I wanted to get that thing finished, and there was a lot to do. But once I understood how everything worked, like I wanted to understand how the plumbing worked and the hot water heater and the electricity and all those things. Once I understood how those things worked, none of that was of interest to me at all anymore. So now, when I have to have anything done at all in my house, I just hire somebody to do it. Yep. The other thing is, like, everything I've ever wanted to do, you always think it's going to take you 10, 15 minutes on a home improvement project. It takes 5 times that, and you ruin 6 things in the process. Fall through the ceiling, break all the stuff. It's miserable.
So this is yours, and so I want to encroach as little as possible. It's been interesting for me. I wonder if you can think back to when you were running the business several years ago. For me, I also don't want to fix anything around my house, the house that I'm currently sitting in. I will hire everything out. I do kind of like working in my yard now. I don't want to mow my lawn. I don't mind mowing my lawn in April and May. The problem is at some point it gets to be July. I don't mow my lawn.
Right.
The rural land that we have, I find a lot of value going out there and doing manual labor, taking the chainsaw out and cutting down trees and stuff. And here's why. It takes my mind off everything. healthier than heroin.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't have to think about the stuff. And so I don't know if you had some distraction type things that you did back when you ran the business. But for me, I was thinking, man, I worked my ass off one day last week with Rachel. I mean, we cut brush and we used the chainsaw. And I thought to myself, I didn't think about one stressful thing. I didn't think about the business. I didn't think about dad dying. I didn't think about, I didn't think any of that stuff. I just ran a chainsaw.
You have to be in the moment. You have to be in the moment. Yeah. It's wise to be in the moment when you're running a chainsaw.
Yeah, in fact, it is. Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I and we even cleaned up the woods behind our house as well. And I enjoyed that. So a little bit of that type of.
But you're
of
not
effort,
installing
I think,
a ceiling
totally
fan.
fun. No,
Not interested.
I'm not installing a ceiling fan. Not interested.
Yeah.
I will screw that up. It'll be so much worse than it would be if a professional did it. I hate shopping. I hate everything about shopping. Can't stand shopping. Don't want to physically go anywhere where I have to shop. Yep. And even really electronic shopping, unless it's for books, which I love, I don't really probably want to do.
Although you and I have gone the same direction now, where we use algorithm-based shopping for things like clothes that send us clothes that fit us and is our style, right? So that things like Trunk Club and places like that. So when so now we have people that are like, we know what size you are and we know the kind of stuff you wear, and you're like, it's almost like Tinder but for clothes. You like swipe up or swipe left or whatever. Yes, nope, and they figure it out, and then they just send you your clothes.
Yep.
Pretty sweet gig.
And I also have, my wife will supplement that. She loves shopping and it's all about fashion. So she buys me things sometimes, and I'm like, yeah, that's great. She has a tendency to know what I wear well, but I don't want to do it. I think it's miserable. And this next one goes to like a whole thing related to the way that we just run our lives, and that is shuttling kids to things that don't matter. Is something I don't want to spend any time doing at all. Yep. This goes to a general principle that I hold, which is that our children, the children of America, maybe the children of the world, but I don't know the children of the world that well, but I know the children of America reasonably well, are way, way overcommitted. Yep. I mean, overcommitted to a degree that is mind-blowing. And we don't do it. We don't participate in that business. So when people tell us, we started out this morning taking our kids to hockey practice, and then we went from hockey practice to basketball practice, and then we went from basketball practice to this other thing. I'm like, choir. I would literally die if I had to do that. I would rather just not exist. By the way, than be in that world.
How often do you think? And I don't know, right? We're the same way. We're just not doing that, right? My experience as a public school teacher for 10 years tells me that it's not the kid that committed themselves.
Oh, no, that's
it's correct. Mom and dad living vicariously through said kid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, mom and dad are like, and you even see it. Yeah. Like, go to any competition whatsoever. Let's use baseball as an example because it's an easy one to put in your head. And just imagine that you're standing on the pitcher's mound behind the pitcher of the Little League kid that's pitching the ball, and you're looking in the stands. Yeah. You'll notice that the parents that are out there are literally physically moving their bodies like the children should be doing.
They got eye black on. They got a jersey. Their kid's 7. They're wearing an extra large size jersey with their kid's number on it.
Yep.
And eye black.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
I've seen like a cheerleading competition where the mother was literally physically moving her arms in each of the movements that the cheerleader down on the floor was doing. And I'm just like, everything about that makes me want to die.
Yes.
So not into that.
Nope.
Don't do that. Nope. The last one, this may be shocking. This is shocking to even some people who know me. It robs me of value to compare or compete with anybody. I don't like competing.
Interesting.
I am not. It's really funny. When we play games, even as a family, my favorite games are where the family is playing a game to beat the game, not each other. I'm not looking for a number one in that. It actually drives me crazy. Now, it does make sense if you go back to the podcast where we go over our personality things. I'm a peacemaker. To me, that's just a whole hell of a lot of conflict that I don't need.
I refuse to play a game where strategy cannot win.
Yeah.
Like Chutes and Ladders, if all we're doing is like spinning stuff and rolling dice to see who wins, I refuse to play.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that completely. I don't generally like games all that much anyway. And I will play some. I mean, we play Uno and stuff like that. My kids are little, so there's only so many games we can play. Sure. But also, I don't, for me, and this there's a side of this that adds a lot of value to my life, which is the reverse of it. I do not get joy out of competing with others. I get joy out of PRing myself.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the weight room is a great example. I mean, for me, when you and I used to do powerlifting competitions, or I only did one strongman competition, but in all of those, it really wasn't the other people on the floor that I cared about at all. I did not care. I was out there to see if I could set my own PRs. And if I could, awesome. And if I walked away with a trophy, great. But the trophy did not matter much to me. It was, could I beat myself?
Yeah.
That was the thing that I wanted to know. And so, that's sort of the flip side of all of that.
Yeah, that's good.
So those are the robs. Those are the things that rob me of value that I could go through quickly. Things that add value to my life. Traveling for pleasure, traveling for business, but I did not enjoy very much, by the way. But traveling for pleasure or experiences, probably the better way to say that is just experiences. We realized a long time ago that life is just so much better to spend money on experiences than it is to spend money on things and stuff. We don't care about stuff, but we do care a lot about experiences. And when I look back over the last, 5 years back in that era where people used to congregate and be around each other, I know that's apparently never going to happen again. I'm sorry. I'm in the Northeast, and I'm really, really getting tired of being in my house.
Sure. Robs you of value.
Yeah, right.
Even as an introvert who hates
year
people,
we got
at this point, you kind of want to go out and see some humans.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, if nothing else, I just want to go be in these cool places and travel and see the world and do the things that we were in the middle of doing.
Yeah, I was supposed to fly to Mexico tomorrow morning. And I'm not going to get to do that now. And my 20th anniversary is a week from today.
Yeah, we had a Miami trip that we missed. We have a whole thing planned to go up into Maine. We're still not sure if that's going to happen. And usually by this time of the year, we've taken 2 or 3 trips that are fairly big. And I miss that. Obviously, most of you will know this, that reading books brings me an enormous amount of joy and value, although I am time limited on that. There's a law of diminishing return, or law of diminishing utility, I should probably say, on reading books for me, in that after some period of time of continuously reading books, I start getting a little weird. I need to set the book down and get up and go talk to my wife and play with my kids or something. And that all goes this whole idea that is, I've listed a little further down, which is probably the thing that brings me the most joy, is just compounding my own knowledge and personal growth, whatever that is. I love investing in knowledge and wisdom and understanding things, because those things help me understand and make sense of the world around me. They help me maybe be halfway decent at predicting things in uncertain circumstances, which is nice. And so, I would add to reading books things like, I like to take online courses. Usually I do them at double speed, or I'll watch videos at 1.75x or something, so that I can blast through some new thing. And, we talked about, I think it was last time, that I was a programmer. I still learn programming languages, new ones, even now, even with absolutely no reason to do it, because I think it's fun. Yeah. So I still do some of that. Working out has always been something that added a lot of joy and value for me. And it's funny, from the time Matt and I were little, it started when I was 10, I think, and got that first plastic weight set from Walmart.
Yeah. The concrete dipped.
Yeah. And I liked it then. I liked everything about it. It just made me feel good. I liked all the elements to that. And even though there have been times in my life where I couldn't work out with a lot of consistency, it didn't stop for an extended period of time, really, ever. And so I've just always really enjoyed that. I love the way it makes me feel. I know that it's an investment in the future, because people who work out have a little bit easier time dealing with things like depression, as well as fighting off, mental disorders for the future, which is a really good thing for you and me, because it runs in the family. So there's just a lot of big value there, and I absolutely love the time that I get to spend working out. Recently, I've combined that with working out with my wife. She works out with me, and that's made it even better.
I like watching the look on her face when she's like walking on the treadmill while you're doing your last set of deadlifts.
Yeah,
I always have to go back and rewatch her deadlifts because I always like watching her to see if she's got a look of fear in her eyes or if she's just like looking on like with a commending sort of smile, or if she's like, I don't know if I'm happy that he's lifting this much.
She was a little nervous on squats a while back, but I mean, those have taken off, so it's made it quite a bit easier. Yeah. So those things do it. Good movies. I am, so Matt and I were talking earlier about shows. Recently, I think I've run out of all the shows, and that's just maybe a COVID-19 thing. Like, I've run out of almost every show that I wanted to watch, because in the evening after Jenny and I put the kids down, I would typically watch, we'd watch one or two shows together, and I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm sick of that. However, I love great movies, but they just take a lot longer to produce, and right now there's nobody out there. But I can go back and watch old movies and be super happy about it. I've got a ton of old movies that I love and will still go back and watch. Wes Anderson specifically, I'm a huge Wes Anderson fan. Spending time with my wife. This is not obligatory. My wife does not listen to this podcast. So I'm not saying this so that I get points. My wife and I we both don't have a whole pile of friends outside of our circle. It's just not something that we value. And there's goods and bads to that. I know, I had a therapist at one point or another that told me that was really, really strange. Yeah. But it's always been that way. I love my close family. But I've really not needed for a very, very, very long time. Part of this, my own introversion. I don't need anything more than the close family that I have, and spending time with my wife is brings me a ton of joy. When the kids go down at night, sometimes we'll forego the show and we'll just literally hang out. We'll just chat. I'll have a drink. My wife gets headaches, so she can't really drink very much. So I'm usually the one drinking. She's sitting there and we're chatting back and forth, and I love it.
Yeah.
I like to teach my kids. I get a lot of value from teaching my kids stuff. Matt and I were talking about earlier this as well, is like this idea that especially around things like history, and we talked about this in a previous podcast, anchoring things like math and science into that history. I just like to watch my kids' eyes light up. And it takes a while. They have to get a little older. My oldest son is sort of in that space. My middle son is, things that I like to learn too. Like it's so much fun. He's really into figurines the way that I was. And Matt could tell you, when I was a kid, I played with G.I. Joes. Yep. Like hours and hours and hours on end. And my middle son is the same way. And so when I told him that I thought I had figured out how we could get some plastic compounds and make our own figurines like out of 3D plastic
printer and stuff, or like just
we have a 3D printer, so we did some of that, but we actually pour molds and make them. Yeah. And then he paints them, makes his own little weaponry for it and stuff. And it's all material science, but he doesn't know he's learning material science. I just slowly feed it in there. Yeah. But I love it too. And I'm learning in that process as well. And I'm having an absolute blast doing it. I love doing that stuff. And really the last piece of this is we kind of hit this, in some of the higher level things, but the biggest bulk of my time I like to spend in investing in my own knowledge of stuff. And that does come in a lot of different forms. So it's not just books. We talk about books a lot because, there are these great condensed ways that people take, 15, 20 years of their life and put it into 250 pages, and you can learn a lot. But these days, man, we have so many more opportunities than what our parents had. Sure. You've got free online courses that you can take from some of the best universities in the world, and you can take them for free at your own pace. Right. There is
you
no
can go take a class at MIT or Cambridge, and it doesn't cost anything. Right. You don't get official credit, but you get official education. You get to learn
Who cares
the thing.
About the credit?
Right. That's right. Yeah.
There are just so many ways that you can grow and learn, and the knowledge from biology ends up applying one way or the other to the knowledge that you have in math, and the knowledge that you have in investing, and the knowledge that you're going to have and that you build with human interaction. So I get a lot of joy out of learning new things and understanding new concepts that help add clarity for me about the way the world works. Because I really hate being confused about why people behave certain ways or why certain things happen. When those questions pop up, I have a tendency to rush to a book and start reading my way through it so that I can understand why that happens.
Yeah, I've watched you also, you touched on this, but I know that you don't learn all of these things just to impress people. I know that you learn them because you've always loved to learn, but I've also watched the way your eyes light up and you get really excited and you really almost become like an extrovert when you're able to teach the things that you've learned. So when there's a thing that you're passionate about and the audience is right, to watch you teach that, you can tell there's a lot of joy there in being able to teach those things.
It freaks some people out in a like a party type setting, or just when people are kind of milling about, because usually I won't be saying anything. I'll just be standing somewhere and somebody will come up to me, and I don't do small talk. I hate small talk. I just can't. I have a very hard time with small talk. And then they'll hit a topic, maybe by accident, that is one that's very exciting to me, that I've recently been learning about. And all of a sudden, boom, lights go on. And then the poor people can't get away.
Right.
And sometimes Jenny has to like tug on my arm and be like, hey, it's kind of maybe time to let him go.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
But yeah, I definitely do that. I get extremely excited about the things I'm excited about. And I do love teaching. Teaching is a blast. I love it. I loved it when I was working. One of my favorite things about being a high level executive at a company was that I could carve out time to teach my employees things that I knew would apply to their job and their life and would help them grow. That was a great outlet to be able to use some of the knowledge I'd accumulated.
Yeah. I think for me, this podcast has done that better than almost anything else. I mean, when you run a podcast where essentially you and your podcast partner are the subject matter experts, I've kind of said everything that I know about strength training, And so I think we're going to see some more series coming up on the podcast where I feature some more of my staff, because they are subject matter experts maybe in places where I'm not, injury rehab and prevention, or training, somebody like Jonathan Sullivan, who talks about training athletes of aging, like seniors, or whatever those things are, where they are the subject matter experts and they're passionate about something that I don't know about and I want to learn. It's been a phenomenal outlet that at this point, that kind of all of the things that I've learned all these years about strength training, and then also how strength training has impacted my life in ways that other people wouldn't be able to make that connection. The podcast has been able to do for us. As a matter of fact, right now, like, I'm loving doing these principle series because so much of what we've learned, you were in the software business and you always kind of knew you were going in that route. And I transitioned out of teaching into the strength world and the fitness business, but I was always super passionate about strength. Like, it was always the thing. It sucked because you actually were genetically more gifted than me at that stuff, but you liked to train, but you didn't super like to read everything there was to know about the thing. Like, you read all this stuff. Like, I remember you having Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding back in the mid 80s when there wasn't anything else out, right? Like, that was the thing.
That book did not end up being very scientific.
No, it was not,
unfortunately.
But I mean, when you're a kid, that's the kind of stuff we read that stuff, but and so it's provided this great outlet for me as well to be able to talk through those things. It's been really fun. And so now to continue to find people who are on our staff and on our team and part of, they understand the ethos at Barbell Logic has been really, really cool. And then the way all of those things have affected my life as a dad, as a boss, as a husband, as a citizen, we can talk about those things in the Principles podcast. It's been really cool. And the reason this series really kind of came to be was because, especially now that you've moved away a couple years ago up to Boston, we're close. We've been close pretty much our whole life. And there were far less opportunities for us to get together and have these discussions. And we would sit at home at Thanksgiving or Christmas, when you would come back to Springfield or when we would fly to Boston, and our family, our mom and sister and stuff, they'd be like, I could just listen to you guys for hours. The two of us we'll just talk for like 4 straight hours, and we're just kind of feeding off each other. And so that's kind of how this came to be. So this series has brought a lot of joy to my life too. I'm excited about. We got a list of 80 more things to talk about on the.
There's always more things. You know, it's funny.
Well, hold on.
I think,
in fact, after doing 320 podcasts all on strength training, there aren't always more things. Like at some point, there will actually be a thing where we'll be like, we talked about all the principles that matter, right? Like you could always come up with stuff, but there will be a point, if we do one of these a week, for 2 years, that'll be 100. Well, we will have done 104 of these. 104 major life-driving principles. At that point, we're probably going to start going, we're going to start struggling with the list. Yeah. And that's okay, because like, what's the point of doing the thing? Like, I'm excited that we get to help our listeners today, but you know what I'm really excited about? 10 years from now, our kids being able to listen to this, and if they want to, and knowing what their dads thought about stuff. And I think that's pretty cool. It's been preserved.
I totally agree. This is an interesting way to think about the podcast, because there will be subjects that I read about, learn about, and apply. And then 5 years later, circumstances will have changed in my life, and everything around that subject has to be reapplied in a completely different way, in a completely different context. And so one of the things that's interesting is it's an extremely rare week that goes by that I don't find myself struggling with something. Sure. And when you look at that sort of in its guts, you can find that there's more. There's more to the principle and the way you apply it than how you had done in the past. And so I do think I think you're right. I mean, there is a point at which you're just sort of, you're done talking about core principles. But I also think that there's, if you look at any given week of your life, there are struggles, there are things to be learned. And at the heart of it is something that you might have been missing that once discovered would have really helped you out in that particular circumstance. I know I'm dealing with several of those right now this very week. And so, there'll be plenty to talk about, I think, as time goes on.
Yeah, that's a great, and maybe the single greatest takeaway that our listeners can have for this series is not that you need to agree with Chris and I and our principles. And you and I haven't gotten into too many places yet where we disagree, but there are a handful of things that we don't necessarily see eye to eye on. That doesn't matter. Like, you don't need to agree. You don't need to be part of the cult of Matt and Chris Reynolds. Like, that's not what the purpose of this is. Matter of fact, we want to move as far away from that as we possibly can. The purpose is, do you understand what principles drive your life? Yeah. And it's to get people to think about those things. And I think for us, we have an advantage in that in recording the podcast about these principles, it sort of codifies these principles for us and forces us to think a little bit harder about them, and both in the present as we record them and also in the future as we look back and say, you know what? I, in fact, don't feel that way anymore about that thing.
Yeah.
I was telling Rachel, I hadn't shared with her yet the personality stuff, and I said, "Hey, guess where I came out on the Myers-Briggs on the extroverted introverted thing?" She was like, super extrovert. I was like, I was like, I'm still an extrovert, but it's been reduced by 30% in the last 5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And at some point, I told her, I was like, I wouldn't be surprised when I'm 50 if I'm just over the line into being introverted.
Right. Because
you spend your whole life like talking to people, communicating to people, being around people, influence people, things like that. And at some point you're like, okay, I'm ready to be by myself for a while. So
I'm good now.
And that's okay. So it'll be fun to look back at these things after communicating those principles and kind of codifying those things. And I've said this, I think probably 50 times in the 320 podcasts that we've recorded. If you have not sat down, listeners, and written down the things, literally on a piece of paper, or on your notepad, on your phone, it's fine, that bring you value and bring you joy, or rob you of value and rob you of joy, you're missing out. You should do it. Because what you'll find, there will be some things that rob you of value that do not need to be replaced, right? For example, like there are unhealthy things. I can drink too much. I can watch pornography. I don't need to replace those things with something else. I just need to purge my life of those things. But there are lots of those things, like you mentioned, like very simple, amoral things. Like I don't like mowing my lawn and have to spend my Saturdays working on my trimming the hedges. And what brings me value is to have somebody else do that. Like that's the value. And I've told this story lots of times. The most practical thing that I did the very first time I ever did this was the business was taking off. Things were going well. I was still doing payroll, like calculating payroll. But I'm also the guy paying the payroll, which means as I calculated it up, it just would make me like angry and I would sweat. And you just, it was like doing your taxes when you knew you were going to owe a bunch at the end. And you were like, how much is it going to be? How much is it going to be? You kept kind of tallying. And eventually I was like, why am I doing this? I could just hire somebody else to do the payroll. And then they can just send me the email and I can look at it and be like, Gugh. Okay. And then that's it.
Yeah.
Rather than taking 9 hours to do the thing. Yeah.
Well, so much of this, the reason, the huge value in writing down a list like this is that, look, let's say it's mowing the lawn like it is for me. It's not a huge value to you to not mow the lawn once in your life.
Yeah.
But if you get it done with mowing the lawn for the rest of your life, you've just had a compounded effect of time.
That's exactly right.
Which means that you have compounded your free time that's available to you to do the other things that do add value.
That's right.
And that's one of the easiest steps in this is to you almost have to have a running list for like a month or two. You start your list by scanning your past week. And then as time goes on, when you find yourself particularly irritated that you're doing something, go grab your list and be like, I don't want to do that anymore.
That's right.
And so there's a way you can go through that. And the reason that it's valuable is that once you have come up with a way to get rid of that piece of time suck in your life, if you can do it forever, then it has a massive, massive multiplicative effect in freeing up additional time.
That's right. If you mow your lawn an hour a week, every week, let's say you mow 30 weeks a year, right? So a little more than half of the year. You do that for 50 years. That's 1,500 hours that you mowed. Now, if you like mowing, beautiful. That's 1,500 hours that brought you joy. But if you hate it, that's 1,500 hours that you hated. That's almost 40-hour work weeks.
That's right. And it's the opportunity cost of that time that is the actual worst part of it.
That's exactly right. Because
not only did you do 1,500 hours that you hated, you did that instead of 1,500 hours of things that you could have
liked.
Loved.
That's exactly right. It's the swing. Yep, that's good. All right, dude, thanks for sharing that stuff. You've listened to another Barbell Logic episode of the Principles Edition, Principles series, where we talk about values, principles, things that really drive our lives every single Sunday. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you tomorrow.